Paul Kane stood at his kitchen counter, methodically spreading peanut butter across wheat bread. The morning routine had become his anchor, something predictable in a house that felt increasingly foreign. Outside, Norman, Oklahoma stretched under an October sky, the suburban street quiet except for the distant hum of traffic on Interstate 35. Aviana, breakfast, he called toward the stairs. His daughter appeared moments later, backpack slung over one shoulder, dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. At 14, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that reminded Paul of her mother, the same thoughtful way of observing before speaking, the same reluctance to take up too much space. "Thanks, Dad." Aviana accepted the sandwich and wrapped it in a paper towel. Her movements were efficient, practiced. She had learned not to linger in the kitchen. Heavy footsteps thundered down the stairs. Briggs Givens burst into the room, 13 years old, but already as tall as Aviana. His hair stuck up at odd angles, and his t-shirt bore yesterday's stains. "Where's my lunch?" Briggs demanded, yanking open the refrigerator door. "Make it yourself," Paul said without looking up from his own sandwich. "Mom always makes it for me." "Your mom's not here. She's at work, like most adults." Briggs slammed the refrigerator door. "This is stupid. At Dad's house, everything was ready when I got up." Paul felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice level. "Then maybe you should have stayed at your dad's house." "Briggs, honey, what's wrong?" Dana's voice drifted from the living room. She appeared in the doorway, still in her robe, coffee cup in hand. At 39, Dana had perfected the art of looking helpless while somehow always getting what she wanted. "Paul won't make my lunch," Briggs whined. Dana turned to Paul with that familiar expression, disappointed, but trying to be understanding. "Paul, he's just a kid. It takes 2 seconds. He's 13. Avian has been making her own lunch since she was 10. Well, Avian is different. She's more." Dana paused, searching for the right word. "Independent." Avian is stiffened beside Paul. The word hung in the air like smoke. "Independent," Paul repeated. "Right." The sound of flip-flops announced Yvonne's arrival. Dana's older sister shuffled into the kitchen, somehow managing to look both exhausted and irritated at the same time. Her blonde hair was pulled into a messy bun, and her oversized t-shirt read, "World's okayest mom." "What's all the noise about?" Yvonne demanded. "Paul's being mean to Briggs," Dana explained. Yvonne fixed Paul with a stare. "Really? Making a kid fend for himself? That's rich, coming from someone who barely talks to his own daughter." Paul's hand stilled on his sandwich. "Excuse me, you heard me. When's the last time you asked Aviana about school? Her friends? Anything that matters." Aviana stepped closer to Paul. "He asks me every day. Stay out of grown-up conversations." Yvonne snapped. The kitchen fell silent. Paul felt heat rise in his chest, but he forced it down. He had learned to pick his battles carefully since Dana and Yvonne had turned his home into their personal kingdom. "Briggs, make your lunch," Paul said quietly. "Everyone else, I suggest you get ready for your day." "Don't tell my son what to do," Yvonne said. "Then you tell him. Or better yet, do it yourself. Seems like that's what you're here for anyway." Dana set her coffee cup down hard. "Paul, that's enough. Yvonne is family. She's going through a difficult time, and we're helping her get back on her feet. For 6 months, however long it takes." Paul looked at his daughter. Aviana was staring at her sandwich, shoulders hunched. She had withdrawn into herself again, the way she did whenever the house erupted into one of these territorial disputes. "Come on, sweetheart," Paul said. "I'll drive you to school." In the truck, Aviana was quiet for several blocks. "They don't like me," she finally said. Paul glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "That's not true." "Yes, it is. And that's okay. I don't like them either." Her honesty hit Paul like a punch to the stomach. He pulled into the school drop-off line and put the truck in park. "Aviana, I need you to know something. This situation, it's temporary. Is it?" The question carried more weight than a 14-year-old should have to bear. Paul turned in his seat to face her. "Yes, it is. I promise you that." Aviana studied his face with those serious dark eyes. "Do you love Dana more than me?" "No, never. Not even close." "Then why do you let them treat me like this?" Paul felt his chest tighten. "Because I'm trying to keep the peace. Because I thought if I was patient, things would get better. Because I was wrong about everything." I don't know, he said, but I'm figuring it out. Aviana nodded and gathered her things. Okay, I trust you, Dad. She climbed out of the truck and walked toward the school building without looking back. Paul watched until she disappeared through the front doors, then sat in the parking lot for another 10 minutes, trying to understand how he had let things get this bad. Paul spent the day at the college trying to focus on teaching his students proper torch technique, but his mind kept drifting back to Aviana's question, "Why do you let them treat me like this?" By the time he drove home that evening, he had convinced himself that things would be better. Maybe the morning tension had cleared the air. Maybe everyone would be more respectful. The house was dark when he pulled into the driveway. Dana's car was missing. She was probably working late again. Paul found a note on the kitchen counter. Gone to dinner with clients. Back late. Leftovers in fridge. D. He climbed the stairs and knocked on Aviana's door. Come in. She was sitting at her desk, doing homework, earbuds in. When she saw him, she pulled them out. Hey, Dad. How was work? Good. Yours? Fine. Same as always. Paul sat on the edge of her bed. Where is everyone? Dana's at dinner. Yvonne took Briggs to get new shoes. They left around 4. You've been here alone. I like it better when they're gone. The honesty in her voice made Paul's chest ache. Aviana, Dad, it's okay. I'm not a little kid. I can handle being alone for a few hours. But that wasn't the point, and they both knew it. The point was that his daughter preferred solitude to the company of her own family. Paul was about to say more when they heard the front door slam. Where the hell is everyone? Yvonne's voice carried up the stairs. Language, Paul called down. Don't parent me, Paul. Heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs. Briggs appeared in Aviana's doorway without knocking. I need you to do my laundry, he announced. Aviana looked up from her homework. What? My laundry. I spilled something on my good jeans, and I need them clean for tomorrow. So wash them yourself. Briggs stepped further into the room. Mom said you're supposed to help out more around here, since you live here for free and all. Paul stood up. Briggs, that's enough. I'm not talking to you. Briggs kept his eyes on Aviana. I'm talking to her. So what's it going to be? Are you going to do my laundry or not? Not. Aviana said calmly. Briggs's face flushed red. You think you're so much better than everyone else, don't you? I think I'm not your maid. Girls. Yvonne's voice boomed from the hallway. What's going on up here? She appeared behind Briggs, shopping bags in both hands. When she saw Paul, her expression soured. Oh, you're home. This is my house, Yvonne. Of course I'm home. Briggs asked Aviana to help with some laundry. And she's being difficult, Yvonne said. I asked her to do my laundry, Briggs corrected. There's a difference. No, there isn't, Yvonne said. Families help each other. That's what families do. Aviana set down her pencil. I'm not his family. The words hung in the air like a slap. Yvonne's eyes narrowed. Excuse me, you heard me. I'm not his family. You're not my family. You're guests in my father's house. Aviana, Paul warned. He agreed with her, but he could see the storm building in Yvonne's face. No, let her talk, Yvonne said. I want to hear this. Go ahead, sweetie. Tell us how you really feel. Aviana looked at Paul, then back at Yvonne. I feel like I'm tired of being treated like a servant in my own home. I feel like you've been here for 6 months, and you still act like we owe you something. I feel like your son thinks he can order me around because you taught him that he's more important than I am. Briggs took a step forward. You little. Watch it, Paul said sharply, but Yvonne was already moving. She dropped her shopping bags and pointed a finger at Aviana. You spoiled little brat. You have no idea how good you have it. Your father gives you everything, and you can't even show basic respect to the people who are trying to make this family work. What family? Aviana shot back. The family where I get criticized for everything I do? The family where I have to hide in my room to avoid being yelled at? The family where a 13-year-old boy thinks he can boss me around because his mother taught him that girls exist to serve him? Yvonne's face went white with rage. You're in our house, little girl. You better learn your place. This isn't your house, Aviana said quietly. It's my father's house, and my place is as his daughter. The silence that followed was electric with tension. Paul could see Yvonne calculating her next move, could see Briggs feeding off his mother's anger, could see his daughter sitting straight in her chair, refusing to back down. Paul, Yvonne said without taking her eyes off Aviana. You need to do something about this attitude. The only attitude I see is yours. Yvonne spun around. Are you kidding me? Your daughter just disrespected me in front of my son, and you're taking her side? I'm taking the side of truth. Paul had heard enough. Briggs, go to your room. Yvonne, I need to talk to you downstairs. I'm not done here, Yvonne said. Yes, you are. Something in Paul's voice must have gotten through to her, because Yvonne gathered her shopping bags and herded Briggs toward the door. This isn't over, she said. After they left, Paul sat back down on Aviana's bed. You okay? I'm fine. Are you proud of me for standing up for myself? Paul studied his daughter's face. She was trying to look strong, but he could see the strain around her eyes. I'm always proud of you, but I'm worried about what happens next. What do you mean? Paul thought about Yvonne's parting words, about the look in her eyes. I don't think this is going to get better on its own. Aviana nodded. I know, but I can't keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not. I can't keep letting them treat me badly just to keep the peace. I know, and I shouldn't have asked you to. Dad, yeah, when you said this situation was temporary, what did you mean? Paul looked at his daughter, really looked at her. She was growing up too fast, forced to navigate adult problems that she shouldn't have to face. I meant that changes are coming. I can't tell you exactly what or when, but I promise you that things are going to be different. Okay, I believe you. The next morning, Paul left early for work. When he returned home that afternoon, the house was quiet. Dana's car was in the driveway, but there was no sign of anyone inside. Hello, he called. No answer. Paul walked through the downstairs rooms, then climbed the stairs. Aviana's door was closed. He knocked. Aviana. No answer. He tried the handle. Locked. Aviana, are you in there? A long pause, then Dad. Yeah, it's me. Can you open the door? Another pause. Just a minute. Paul heard movement inside, then the click of the lock. The door opened a crack, and Aviana peered out. Hey, she said. Something was wrong. Her voice was too careful, her posture too rigid. Can I come in? She stepped back and opened the door wider. Paul entered the room and immediately saw what she had been trying to hide. The left side of her face was swollen, and there was a dark bruise forming along her jawline. Paul felt the world tilt sideways. What happened? Aviana looked away. I fell. You fell. Yeah, down the stairs. This morning after you left. Paul knelt in front of her, gently turning her face toward the light. The bruise was fresh, but it wasn't consistent with a fall. It was too localized, too precise. Aviana, tell me what really happened. She met his eyes for a moment, then looked away again. I told you. I fell. Paul felt ice forming in his veins. Where is everyone? Dana's at work. Yvonne and Briggs went to the store. When? About an hour ago. Paul stood up and walked to Aviana's window. He could see the neighbor's house, could see Mrs. Peterson working in her garden. Life continuing normally while his world was falling apart. Aviana, I need you to tell me the truth. Did someone hit you? Silence. Did Yvonne hit you? Aviana's shoulders started to shake. Sweetheart, I can't help you if you don't tell me what happened. You can't help me anyway, she whispered. The words hit Paul like a physical blow. He turned back to his daughter and saw her crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Yes, I can, but I need to know what happened. Aviana wiped her eyes and sat down on her bed. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she began to talk. This morning, after you left, Briggs came to my room again. He had a basket of laundry and said I needed to do it before school. Paul sat down beside her, and I said no. I told him I wasn't his maid, and I wasn't going to do his laundry. Then what? He got mad and went to get Yvonne. She came up and started yelling at me. She said I was disrespectful and spoiled, and I needed to learn my place in this family. Paul's hands clenched into fists. Go on. I told her this wasn't her house, and she wasn't my mother, and I didn't have to listen to her. That's when she got really angry. What did she do? Aviana touched her bruised face gingerly. She said I needed to learn some respect. She told Briggs to go get Dana's belt from the bedroom. Paul felt the blood drain from his face. She hit you with a belt? They took me down to the garage. Yvonne said it would be quieter down there. She made me lean against your workbench, and she hit me with the belt. 5 times across my back. Paul's vision started to blur around the edges. And Briggs, he watched. He laughed when I cried. The room fell silent except for the sound of Aviana's quiet crying and Paul's ragged breathing. When it was over, Yvonne said if I told you, she'd make sure it was worse next time. She said you wouldn't believe me anyway, because I was just a lying, spoiled brat. Paul stood up and walked to the door, then back to the window, then back to the door. His mind was spinning, trying to process what he had just heard. Dad, he turned back to his daughter. She was looking at him with those serious dark eyes, waiting for his response. Turn around, he said gently. What? Turn around. I need to see your back. Aviana hesitated, then slowly turned and lifted her shirt. Paul's stomach lurched. There were 5 distinct red welts across her back, some of them already darkening into bruises. Paul pulled out his phone and started taking pictures. Dad, what are you doing? Documenting evidence. He took photos of her face, her back, and the belt marks from multiple angles. Then he sat down and opened the voice recorder on his phone. I need you to tell me everything again. From the beginning. Don't leave anything out. Why? Because what happened to you is called child abuse. And we're going to make sure it never happens again. Aviana's eyes widened. But what if Yvonne finds out? What if she makes it worse? Paul knelt in front of his daughter and took her hands in his. Aviana, look at me. I want you to understand something. Yvonne Givens will never touch you again. Never. Do you hear me? But how can you? Because I'm your father. And protecting you is my job. The most important job I'll ever have. Aviana studied his face. What are you going to do? Paul stood up and walked to her dresser. Pack a bag. Just the essentials. We're leaving. Leaving? Where? My sister's house. Aunt Laurel's. While Aviana gathered her things, Paul went to his bedroom and packed his own bag. Then he called his sister. Laurel? It's Paul. I need a favor. What's wrong? You sound terrible. Can Aviana and I stay with you for a few days? Of course. What happened? Paul looked toward Aviana's room. I'll explain when we get there. We'll be over in an hour. Paul, are you okay? No, but I will be. When they were ready to leave, Paul wrote a note and left it on the kitchen counter. Dana, Aviana, and I will be staying elsewhere for a while. We need to talk, but not here and not with your sister present. I'll call you tomorrow. Paul, as they drove toward Laurel's house, Aviana was quiet. Dad, what is it, sweetheart? You said earlier that you were figuring things out. Is this what you meant? Paul looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror. Her face was still swollen, but there was something different in her eyes. Something that looked like hope. Yeah, he said. This is what I meant. Laurel Kane Myers opened her front door before Paul and Aviana had even reached the porch steps. At 45, she had the same dark hair as Paul, but where his was always perfectly controlled, hers fell in natural waves around her shoulders. Her wife Dane stood behind her, concern etched on both their faces. What happened? Laurel demanded as soon as she saw Aviana's bruised face. Inside first, Paul said. They gathered in Laurel's warm kitchen. Aviana sat at the breakfast table while Paul stood by the window, his jaw tight with controlled rage. Show them, Paul said quietly. Aviana lifted her shirt to reveal the belt marks across her back. Dane, a civil rights attorney with 20 years of courtroom experience, went completely still. Who did this? Laurel's voice was deadly quiet. Paul told them everything, the months of escalating tension, the morning's confrontation, Yvonne's threats, and Briggs's participation. When he finished, the kitchen was silent except for the tick of the wall clock. We need to call the police, Dane said finally. No. Paul's response was immediate. Not yet. Paul, this is child abuse. It's a crime. I know what it is. But if we call the police right now, what happens? They take a report, maybe arrest Yvonne, and then what? She posts bail, gets a lawyer, and claims it was discipline that got out of hand. Maybe she gets probation. Maybe she gets community service. And then she's back in my house with Dana, angrier than before. Dane frowned. That's not how the system. That's exactly how the system works, and we both know it. I need something more permanent. Something that sticks. Laurel sat down across from Aviana. Honey, are you okay with staying here for a while? Aviana nodded. I like it here. It's quiet. Good. Then you're staying as long as you need to. Laurel looked at Paul. What are you thinking? Paul pulled out his phone and showed them the photos he had taken. I'm thinking we build a case. Document everything. Get medical records. Gather evidence. And then we strike when they can't dodge. Dane examined the photos with a professional eye. These are good, clear, time-stamped. But we need more. Like what? Medical documentation from a professional. Not just photos. And we need to establish a pattern of behavior, not just one incident. While Laurel cooked dinner, Paul called his boss. Eli, it's Paul. I need to take a few days off. Family emergency. Everything okay? Eli Ramsden had been Paul's supervisor for 3 years. As a former Marine, he understood the importance of handling problems decisively. My daughter was assaulted. I need to deal with some legal matters. There was a pause. Jesus, Paul, whatever you need. Take the whole week, if necessary. Thanks. I'll keep you posted. Paul, if you need anything character witness, someone to vouch for you, just ask. You're good people. After dinner, Dane drove Aviana to a private medical clinic that specialized in documenting abuse cases. The doctor was thorough and professional, photographing every mark and writing a detailed report that would hold up in court. Meanwhile, Paul sat in Laurel's living room and began going through his phone, saving screenshots of text messages and voicemails from Dana and Yvonne. The pattern was clear once he laid it all out: months of escalating hostility toward Aviana, complaints about her selfishness and disrespect, and increasingly aggressive language about the need to put her in her place. When Dane and Aviana returned, they spread everything out on the dining room table like pieces of a puzzle. It's a solid foundation, Dane said, but we need more if we want to go for full custody and a restraining order. Paul's phone buzzed. Dana's name appeared on the screen. She's texting, he said. What does it say? Paul read the message aloud. Where are you? Yvonne said Aviana was being dramatic about falling down the stairs. We need to talk. The three of them stared at the phone. Being dramatic, Laurel repeated. About having her face bruised. Paul typed back. We'll talk when you're ready to hear the truth. Dana's response came immediately. I know the truth. Aviana fell down the stairs because she was running away from a conversation about responsibility. Paul showed the message to Dane. Is this helpful for our case? Very. She's essentially admitting that there was some kind of altercation that resulted in Aviana being injured. Keep the conversation going if you can. Get her to say more. Paul typed, what kind of conversation about responsibility requires a belt? A long pause, then, I don't know what you're talking about. The belt marks on Aviana's back. The ones your sister put there. Another pause. Paul, you're overreacting. Sometimes kids need discipline. Yvonne was just trying to help. Paul looked at Dane, who was nodding encouragingly. Help with what? Teaching Aviana some respect. Some humility. She can't keep acting like she's better than everyone else. By hitting her with a belt, by showing her that actions have consequences. Paul screenshot the conversation and set his phone aside. That's enough for tonight, Dane said. She's already admitted more than she realizes. What happens tomorrow? Tomorrow, I file the paperwork. You talk to Aviana's teachers and get those school records. Laurel talks to your neighbors. And we start building a case that will keep your daughter safe. Paul looked toward the guest room, where Aviana was sleeping. What do I tell her about all this? The truth, Laurel said. That you're her father, and you're going to protect her, and she never has to go back to that house if she doesn't want to. Paul nodded. For the first time in months, he felt like he was moving in the right direction. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Dana. Paul, please come home. We can work this out. He turned off the phone without responding. Some things, he realized, were not worth working out. Paul woke at 5:30, his internal clock unchanged despite sleeping in an unfamiliar bed. Through the guest room window, he could see the first pale light of dawn creeping across Laurel's backyard. He dressed quietly and walked to the kitchen, where Dane was already up, laptop open on the breakfast table, legal documents spread around her like battle plans. Morning, she said without looking up. Coffee's fresh. Paul poured himself a cup and sat down across from her. How long have you been up? Since 4. I wanted to get these filings ready before the courthouse opens. She slid a stack of papers across the table. Emergency protective order request. Temporary custody modification, and divorce papers. Paul looked at the documents without touching them. That fast. The faster we move, the less time they have to prepare a defense. And Paul, She looked up from her laptop. Yvonne made a mistake last night. What do you mean? Dane turned her laptop around to show him a social media screen. She posted this on Facebook at 11:30 last night. Paul read the post aloud. Some kids these days think they can disrespect adults and get away with it. Glad to see there are still parents willing to teach proper discipline. Hashtag old school parenting, hashtag respect your elders. She's talking about Aviana. Has to be. Posted just hours after the incident, using language that perfectly matches what Aviana described. It's practically a confession. Paul stared at the screen. She's proud of it. Right now, yes. But when she's sitting in a courtroom explaining this post to a judge, it won't look quite so clever. Laurel appeared in the doorway, already dressed for work. As a former youth counselor, she had connections throughout the city's child services network. I called in a favor, she said, pouring coffee. My friend Janet works for CPS now. She's going to flag Aviana's case as high priority. Paul's phone rang. Eli Ramsden's name appeared on the screen. Morning, Paul. How's your daughter? She's safe. That's what matters. Good. Listen, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday. About needing character witnesses. I want you to know that you've got the full support of everyone here at the college. Faculty, staff, administration. If you need people to vouch for what kind of father you are, just say the word. Paul felt his throat tighten. Thanks, Eli. That means more than you know. After he hung up, Paul looked at his sister and her wife. I don't know how to thank you for this. You don't thank family, Laurel said simply. You just do what needs to be done. Aviana appeared in the kitchen doorway, backpack over her shoulder, looking more rested than Paul had seen her in months. Ready for school? Laurel asked. Actually, Dane said, I was hoping Aviana could come with me to the courthouse this morning. She'll need to speak with the judge about the protective order. Paul looked at his daughter. You okay with that? Aviana nodded. I want to tell them what happened. While Dane and Aviana prepared for court, Paul drove to Aviana's school. Washington Middle School was a sprawling brick building that served the diverse neighborhoods of South Norman. Paul had been there many times for parent-teacher conferences and school events, but today felt different. Today he was there as an investigator, gathering evidence to protect his daughter. He found Mrs. Williams, Aviana's math teacher, in her classroom during her planning period. Mr. Kane, how nice to see you. How's Aviana doing? She seemed a bit distracted lately. Paul closed the classroom door and sat down across from her desk. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. He explained the situation carefully, watching Mrs. Williams's expression change from concern to horror. Oh my God, that poor girl. I knew something was wrong, but I never imagined. She pulled out a folder from her desk drawer. Mr. Kane, I've been documenting my concerns for weeks. She showed him copies of emails she had sent to the school counselor, notes about Aviana's declining participation in class, records of missed assignments that were completely out of character. She used to be one of my most engaged students. But over the past 2 months, she's been withdrawn, distracted. Her grades have dropped from A's to C's. Mrs. Williams made copies of all her documentation and put them in an envelope. Mr. Kane, Aviana is a special girl. Smart, kind, thoughtful. Whatever you need to do to protect her, you have my full support. Paul's next stop was the school counselor's office. Ms. Rodriguez had worked at Washington Middle for 8 years and had developed good instincts about which kids were struggling at home. I've been worried about Aviana for a while, she admitted after Paul explained the situation. She used to stop by my office just to chat, but lately she's been avoiding eye contact in the hallways. She pulled Aviana's file and showed Paul notes dating back to early September. I tried to schedule some one-on-one time with her, but she kept declining. Said everything was fine at home, just adjusting to having new family members. Ms. Rodriguez made copies of her notes and added them to Paul's growing collection of evidence. Paul drove from the school to his neighborhood, where he spent the next hour talking to neighbors. Mrs. Peterson, who lived next door, was eager to help. I've seen that woman yelling at your daughter in the driveway multiple times, she said, referring to Yvonne. Just last week, I watched her berate Aviana for leaving her bike on the lawn. The poor child just stood there taking it while that woman screamed at her. Mr. Garcia across the street had similar observations. Both neighbors agreed to provide written statements about what they had witnessed. be by the time Paul returned to Laurel's house. It was past noon. He found Dane and Aviana in the kitchen, looking exhausted but satisfied. "How did it go?" he asked. "Judge Morrison granted the emergency protective order," Dane said. "Yvonne is prohibited from coming within 500 feet of Aviana or any place where Aviana regularly goes school, this house, your workplace." "What about Dana?" "She's not included in the order since she wasn't directly involved in the physical abuse. But the judge made it clear that if she facilitates any contact between Yvonne and Aviana, she could be held in contempt." Paul sat down beside his daughter. "How are you holding up?" "Okay." The judge was nice. She asked me to tell her exactly what happened, and I did. She seemed really angry about it. Paul's phone buzzed with a text message. Dana's name appeared on the screen. "What does it say?" Laurel asked. Paul read the message aloud. "The police were just here with some kind of court order. They said Yvonne can't come home." "What did you do?" He showed the message to Dane, who smiled grimly. "Perfect. Now we know she's been served." Paul typed back, "I protected my daughter. Something you should have done." Dana's response came quickly. "This is insane, Paul. You're destroying our family over a misunderstanding." Paul's phone rang. Dana's name on the screen. "Answer it," Dane said. "Put on speaker. Let's see what she has to say." Paul accepted the call. "Hello, Dana." "Paul, thank God. Where are you? We need to talk about this craziness." "There's nothing crazy about protecting my daughter from people who abuse her." "Abuse?" "Paul, that's ridiculous. Yvonne was trying to teach Aviana some discipline. Sometimes kids need firm boundaries. Firm boundaries don't leave belt marks across a child's back." Silence on the other end of the line. "Dana, are you there?" "Paul, you're exaggerating. It wasn't that bad." Dane was furiously taking notes, recording every word. "It wasn't that bad. Dana, your sister beat my daughter with a belt while your nephew watched and laughed. How is that not that bad?" Yvonne said Aviana was being disrespectful. She was trying to help. "Help with what?" "Help teach her that she's not the center of the universe. That she needs to contribute to this family instead of acting like she's too good for everyone." Paul looked at Aviana, who was listening to every word with a stricken expression. "Contributing to the family by doing Briggs's laundry, by being part of the team, by showing respect to the adults in the house. The adults who don't live there. Yvonne is my sister. This is her home, too." "No, Dana. It's my house. And as of today, Yvonne is banned from coming anywhere near it." "You can't do that." "I just did. There's a court order, Dana. Your sister assaulted my daughter, and a judge agreed that she's dangerous." Another long silence. "Paul, please. Come home. We can work this out. Yvonne feels terrible about what happened. She just wants to apologize." Paul looked at Dane, who was shaking her head vigorously. "Dana, let me ask you something. Do you think what Yvonne did was wrong?" I think maybe she went too far. But Paul, Aviana was being really difficult. She refused to help with simple chores. She was disrespectful to Yvonne and Briggs. So she deserved to be beaten? That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying?" Paul could hear Dana breathing on the other end of the line. "I'm saying that actions have consequences. And maybe if Aviana had been more cooperative, none of this would have happened." The kitchen fell silent. Paul looked around the table at his daughter, his sister, and Dane. All three women were staring at the phone with expressions of disbelief. "Dana," Paul said slowly, "did you just say that my daughter is responsible for being abused?" "I said that if she had been more respectful. She's 14 years old. She was asked to do another child's chores. She said no, and she was beaten for it. And you think that's her fault?" "Paul, you're twisting my words." "No, I'm repeating them. You just told me that my daughter brought this on herself." Paul ended the call and set his phone on the table. "Well," Dane said after a moment, "that was illuminating." Paul's phone rang again. This time it was a call from an unknown number. "Don't answer it," Dane advised. Could be Yvonne calling from someone else's phone. The voicemail notification appeared a few minutes later. Paul played it on speaker. "Paul, this is Torrance Fields, Yvonne's ex-husband. I heard about what happened with Aviana. I need to talk to you. It's important." Paul looked at Dane. "Should I call him back?" "Definitely. If Yvonne's ex-husband wants to talk, that could be very helpful for our case." Paul returned the call immediately. "Torrance? This is Paul Kane." "Paul, thank you for calling back. Listen, I heard about what Yvonne did to your daughter. I'm horrified, but I'm not surprised. What do you mean? Yvonne has anger issues. Always has. During our marriage, she never hit me, but she had incidents with Briggs. Nothing I could prove, nothing that left marks, but I always suspected she was too rough with him when I wasn't around. Paul felt his pulse quicken. Are you willing to testify about that? More than willing. Paul, my son was there when she hurt your daughter. He watched and laughed. That tells me everything I need to know about what kind of environment he's been living in. What are you going to do? I'm filing for emergency custody of Briggs. He's not safe with Yvonne, and after what happened to Aviana, I have grounds to remove him immediately. Paul looked at Dane, who was nodding enthusiastically. Torrance, would you be willing to meet with my attorney? We're building a case against Yvonne, and your testimony could be crucial. Absolutely. And Paul? I work in IT. If Yvonne has been sending threatening messages, making social media posts, anything like that, I might be able to help you recover deleted communications. She did make a Facebook post last night bragging about old-school discipline. Screenshots only capture so much. But if we can access her phone, her computer, her backup files, there might be a lot more evidence of her behavior patterns. After they hung up, Dane was already pulling up legal precedents on her laptop. This is perfect, she said. Having the father or the other child involved testify against Yvonne will be incredibly powerful. And if he can help us access her electronic communications, what kind of things might we find? Messages to Dana complaining about Aviana. Posts on social media about discipline and respect. Maybe communications with friends or family where she admits to hitting her daughter or talks about her intentions to teach her a lesson. Paul thought about the months of tension, the gradual escalation of hostility toward Aviana. Yvonne's not subtle. If there's evidence out there, she probably documented it herself. That's what we're counting on, Dane said. Paul woke before dawn again, his body refusing to sleep past 5:30 despite his exhaustion. He dressed quietly and walked to the kitchen where he found Dane already preparing for what she called the nuclear option. Divorce papers, eviction notice, and restraining order modification, she said, sliding the documents across the table. Everything you need to reclaim your house and your life. Paul stared at the papers. After today, there would be no going back. Any second thoughts? Dane asked gently. Paul thought about Aviana, asleep in the guest room, her face finally peaceful for the first time in months. None. The plan was simple. Paul would go to the house while Dana was at work, and Yvonne was supposed to be staying elsewhere due to the protective order. He would pack more clothes for himself and Aviana, gather important documents, and leave the legal papers on the kitchen counter. But when Paul pulled into his driveway at 8:30, he saw Dana's car. She was supposed to be at work. He called Dane from his truck. Change of plans. She's here. That might actually be better. You can serve her in person. Make sure she understands what's happening. Paul took a deep breath. Here goes nothing. He walked to his own front door and used his key. Inside, he could hear voices from the kitchen, Dana and Yvonne talking in low, urgent tones. Hello, he called out. The conversation stopped abruptly. Dana appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking haggard and nervous. Paul, you came home. I came to get some things, and to give you these. He handed her the envelope containing the divorce papers. Dana stared at the envelope without opening it. What is this? Legal documents. I suggest you read them carefully. Behind Dana, Yvonne appeared. Paul felt his jaw clench at the sight of her. You're violating the restraining order, he said. This is my sister's house, Yvonne replied defiantly. No, it's my house, and there's a court order that says you can't be here. Paul pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police. Wait. Dana stepped between them. Paul, please. Let's just talk about this. There's nothing to talk about. Paul dialed 911. While he waited for someone to answer, Dana tore open the envelope. Divorce papers. Her voice was barely a whisper. Paul, you can't be serious. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report a violation of a protective order. While Paul gave the dispatcher his address and explained the situation, Dana frantically read through the legal documents. Paul, this says you want me out of the house in 14 days. That's right. This is my home, too. Paul ended the call with the police and turned to face his wife. No, Dana. It's not. This house is in my name only. I bought it before we got married. You have no legal claim to it. But we're married. We're supposed to be partners. Partners protect each other's children. They don't blame them for being abused. Dana's face crumpled. Paul, I know I said the wrong thing yesterday. I was upset. I wasn't thinking clearly. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. You meant every word. Yvonne pushed past Dana. This is ridiculous. You're destroying your marriage over a spoiled brat who can't handle a little discipline. Paul felt white-hot rage flood through his system. Get out of my house. Now. Make me. I don't have to. The police are on their way. As if summoned by his words, they heard sirens in the distance. Yvonne, you need to leave, Dana said urgently. Right now. I'm not going anywhere. This is insane. The sirens grew louder. Paul walked to the front window and saw 2 police cars turning onto a street. Last chance, he told Yvonne. Paul, Dana said desperately. What do you want? What will it take to fix this? Paul looked at his wife, this woman he had shared a bed with, made breakfast for, tried to build a future with. I want you to go back in time and choose differently. I want you to have thrown your sister out the moment she threatened my daughter. I want you to have called the police yourself when you saw the bruises on Aviana's face. I want you to have been the woman I thought I married. I can be that woman now. No, you can't, because that woman would never have blamed a 14-year-old girl for being beaten by an adult. The police knocked on the front door. Paul let them in and explained the situation while Dana and Yvonne watched from the kitchen doorway. Ma'am, one of the officers said to Yvonne, you need to come with us. I haven't done anything wrong. You're in violation of a court order. That's a criminal offense. Paul watched as they handcuffed Yvonne and led her to the patrol car. She was still protesting her innocence as they drove away. When Paul turned back to the house, Dana was sitting at the kitchen table, crying. I've lost everything, she said. You made your choice. I chose my family. I chose loyalty. You chose the wrong side of your family. And you chose loyalty to the wrong person. Paul walked upstairs and began packing. He took all of Aviana's clothes, her books, her personal items. From his own room, he gathered enough clothes for a week, important documents, and photo albums that contained pictures of Aviana's mother. When he came back downstairs, Dana was reading through the divorce papers more carefully. Paul, this is so extreme. Can't we at least try counseling? Counseling won't change what you said yesterday. It won't change the fact that you blamed my daughter for being abused. I was wrong. I admit it. I was wrong. Paul set his bags by the front door. Being wrong isn't the same as being sorry. And being sorry isn't the same as changing. What does that mean? It means that even now, even after seeing Yvonne arrested, you still don't understand what you did wrong. Dana wiped her eyes. Then explain it to me. Paul sat down across from her at the kitchen table, the same table where they had eaten breakfast together yesterday morning, when everything had seemed normal. Dana, your sister beat my daughter with a belt. She left marks on her back. Your nephew watched and laughed. And when I told you about it, your first instinct was to make excuses. I was trying to understand. No, you were trying to minimize it. You called it discipline. You said Aviana was being difficult. You suggested that she brought it on herself. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. And that tells me that somewhere in your heart, you believe that my daughter deserved what happened to her. Dana's face went pale. That's not true. Then why did you say it? She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. Paul, I love Aviana. No, you don't. You might have convinced yourself that you do, but love doesn't blame the victim. Love doesn't make excuses for abuse. Dana turned away, rubbing her temples. I can't do this tonight, Paul. I'm exhausted, and we're just going in circles. Then let's not go in circles. Let's solve the problem. What problem? A 13-year-old boy asked his stepsister to help with laundry. She refused. There was a misunderstanding. End of story. Paul felt something cold settle in his stomach. Is that really how you see it? That's what happened. Paul walked to the counter where he had left one more document. What's that? Dana asked. A notice about the joint bank account. I've frozen it. Until we work out asset division, neither of us can access those funds. Dana's eyes widened. Paul, I need that money. My car payment, my credit cards. You should have thought about that before you defended someone who hurt my child. Paul picked up his bags and headed for the door. Paul, wait. He turned back one more time. I know you're angry, Dana said. I know I handled this badly. But we took vows. For better or worse. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Paul thought about those vows, spoken in a small ceremony at the courthouse with Aviana as his best man. It means that when times got worse, I was supposed to be able to count on you to stand with me and my daughter. Instead, you stood with people who hurt her. I can change. Maybe you can. But not with me. Not in my house. Not around my daughter. As he drove away from the house that had been his home for 5 years, Paul felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Relief. The hardest part was over. The lines had been drawn. The battle had begun. That afternoon, Paul met Torrance Fields at a coffee shop near the courthouse. Yvonne's ex-husband was a quiet man in his mid-40s, with the careful demeanor of someone who had learned to watch for danger signs. Thank you for meeting me, Paul said as they sat down with their coffee. Thank you for stopping this before it got worse. Torrance pulled out his laptop. I've been thinking about what you said regarding electronic evidence. If we're going to do this, we need to do it right. What do you mean? I mean legally obtaining access to Yvonne's communications in a way that will hold up in court. I can't just hack into her accounts, but I can help your attorney subpoena her devices and then extract data legally. Torrance opened his laptop and showed Paul a timeline he had created. I've been documenting Yvonne's behavior patterns for the past year. Look at this. The screen showed a detailed calendar with color-coded entries. Red entries are documented incidents where Yvonne lost her temper with Briggs. Yellow entries are times when she made concerning social media posts about discipline and children's behavior. Green entries are times when she contacted me specifically to complain about his attitude. Paul studied the calendar. The entries increased in frequency over the summer months. This is just with Briggs, just so I could document. But look at the pattern. The incidents escalate in severity and frequency, and they're always followed by social media posts justifying her actions. Torrance clicked on a red entry from August. This was the day she grabbed Briggs by the arm hard enough to leave bruises. That night, she posted this on Facebook. He showed Paul a screenshot. Sometimes children need to learn that actions have consequences. A little physical reminder goes a long way toward teaching respect. She documented her own abuse. She doesn't see it as abuse. She sees it as righteous parenting, and she wants validation from her social media friends. Paul thought about the post Yvonne had made after hurting Aviana. Can you recover deleted posts? If they exist in backup files or cache data, yes. Social media platforms keep more information than most people realize. Torrance showed Paul another screen. I've also been tracking her communication patterns with Dana. They text constantly, and most of it is complaining about various people in their lives, including Aviana, especially Aviana. Your daughter has been a frequent topic of conversation since the wedding. Paul felt his anger rising again. What kind of things do they say? I'll let your attorney review the specific content, but the general theme is that Aviana is spoiled, disrespectful, and needs to be brought down a peg. Torrance closed the laptop and leaned forward. Paul, I need you to understand something. What happened to your daughter wasn't a spontaneous loss of temper. It was the culmination of months of building resentment and planning. Yvonne and Dana have been discussing how to handle Aviana's attitude problem for weeks. They've talked about strategies for making her more compliant, more respectful, more willing to accept her place in the family hierarchy. Paul stared at Torrance. Are you saying they plan to abuse her? I'm saying they plan to discipline her more aggressively if she continued to resist their authority. The specific method, the belt, the garage that might have been spontaneous. But the intention to escalate was absolutely premeditated. Paul felt sick. How do you know all this? Because Briggs tells me things. He doesn't understand that what his mother discusses with him isn't normal. He thought the conversations about putting Aviana in her place were just regular family planning. What exactly did Briggs tell you? Torrance hesitated. This is going to be hard to hear. Tell me. Yvonne told Briggs that Aviana thought she was better than them because she was Paul's real daughter. She said that Aviana needed to learn that being Paul's daughter didn't make her special. And she said that if Aviana kept acting superior, they would have to teach her some humility. Paul gripped his coffee cup so tightly his knuckles went white. There's more, Torrance continued. Yvonne told Briggs that he should start making demands of Aviana, asking her to do his chores, clean his room, serve him food. She said it would help Aviana learn to be useful instead of selfish. So the laundry demand wasn't Briggs's idea. No, it was Yvonne's. She orchestrated the whole confrontation. Paul thought about that morning, about Briggs's confident demand that Aviana do his laundry, about the way he had escalated the situation when she refused. He was following a script. Exactly. And when Aviana didn't follow the script, when she stood up for herself, instead of submitting, Yvonne improvised with the belt. Paul sat back in his chair, trying to process what he was hearing. Torrance, will you testify to all of this? Absolutely. And Paul? I'm filing for emergency custody of Briggs today. He's been exposed to this toxic thinking for too long. He needs therapy, and he needs distance from his mother. What about Dana? Was she part of the planning? Torrance nodded grimly. According to Briggs, Dana and Yvonne had several conversations about Aviana's adjustment issues. Dana suggested that maybe Aviana needed to face some real consequences for her behavior. Consequences like being beaten. Dana apparently said that Aviana had been spoiled by Paul's permissive parenting and that she needed to learn respect for authority figures. Paul stood up abruptly and walked to the window. Outside, Norman carried on with its normal suburban rhythms, people going to work, kids walking home from school, families living ordinary lives. Paul, Torrance called softly. I married her, Paul said without turning around. I brought her into Aviana's life. I let this happen. You didn't know. I should have known. I should have seen the signs. What signs? That Dana was charming and attentive during your courtship? That she seemed to care about Aviana? Paul, manipulative people are good at manipulation. That's what makes them dangerous. Paul returned to the table. What happens now? Now we use everything we've learned to make sure Yvonne can never hurt another child, and Dana faces consequences for her role in planning this. Paul's phone buzzed with a text from Dane. Where are you? Aviana wants to talk to you. I need to get back, Paul told Torrance. My daughter needs me. Of course. But Paul, one more thing. I want you to know that Briggs has been asking about Aviana. He wants to apologize for laughing when she was hurt. Is he sorry, or is he scared? Both, I think. He's starting to understand that what happened wasn't normal or okay. Yvonne convinced him that Aviana deserved it, but now that he's away from her influence, he's having second thoughts. Paul considered this. Maybe someday Aviana will be ready to hear his apology. But not now. She needs time to heal. I understand. And Paul, for what it's worth, I think you're an incredible father. We're doing for Aviana fighting this hard, sacrificing your marriage, rebuilding your life. Not every parent would do that. Every parent should. You're right. But not every parent does. The courthouse in downtown Norman was an imposing brick building that had seen decades of family disputes, custody battles, and divorces. As Paul walked through the metal detectors on a cold November morning, he felt the weight of the moment. Today would determine not just his future, but Aviana's safety. Dane met him in the hallway outside Judge Morrison's courtroom, carrying 2 thick folders of evidence. Where's Aviana? Paul asked. She's with Laurel in the witness waiting room. The judge wants to speak with her privately after we present our case. Paul nodded, straightening his tie. He had worn his best suit, the one he reserved for weddings and funerals. Today felt like both. Any last-minute developments? Dana's attorney filed a motion this morning claiming that you're alienating Aviana against her stepmother and that the abuse allegations are fabricated. Paul felt his jaw clench. Based on what? Based on nothing. It's a desperate attempt to muddy the waters. Dane smiled grimly. But we have something they don't know about. What? Torrance finished analyzing Yvonne's phone records. He found text messages between Yvonne and Dana from the morning of the assault. Messages sent while you were at work before the incident happened. Paul's pulse quickened. What do they say? I'll let Judge Morrison read them herself. But Paul, they're damaging. Very damaging. They entered the courtroom, where Dana was already seated at the plaintiff's table with her attorney, a sharp-dressed woman named Rebecca Cross. Dana looked pale and nervous, wearing a conservative dress and minimal makeup in an obvious attempt to appear sympathetic at the defendant's table. Yvonne sat with her public defender, looking defiant despite the restraining order and criminal charges. She wore an expensive suit that suggested she was taking this seriously, but her expression remained unrepentant. Judge Morrison entered, and everyone stood. The judge was a woman in her 50s with graying hair and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who had heard every excuse and sob story the family court system could produce. "Please be seated," Judge Morrison said. "We're here today for the emergency custody hearing in the matter of Kane versus Givens-Kane, as well as the related protective order violation charges." Dana's attorney stood. "Your Honor, my client believes this entire situation has been blown out of proportion. What occurred was a single incident of corporal punishment that has been sensationalized into claims of abuse." "Ms. Cross," Judge Morrison said, "I've reviewed the medical reports and photographic evidence. Belt marks across a 14-year-old's back are not corporal punishment. They're assault." "Your Honor, Yvonne Givens was attempting to instill discipline in a child who had been consistently disrespectful. Ms. Givens is not this child's parent or legal guardian. She had no authority to discipline anyone." Dane stood. "Your Honor, we have significant evidence that this was not an isolated incident, but rather the culmination of months of planned psychological and physical abuse." "Present your evidence, Ms. Myers." For the next hour, Dane methodically laid out the case. She presented medical records documenting Aviana's injuries, photographs of the belt marks, testimony from teachers about Aviana's declining academic performance and emotional withdrawal, and statements from neighbors who had witnessed Yvonne's aggressive behavior. Then came the electronic evidence. "Your Honor, I'd like to present text messages recovered from the defendant's phone, sent on the morning of the assault." Dane handed copies to the judge and the opposing counsel. Paul watched Dana's face go white as she read. Judge Morrison read the messages aloud. "From Yvonne Givens to Dana Kane, sent at 8:15 a.m. Today's the day. If she refuses to do what Briggs asks, we follow through with the plan." Response from Dana Kane at 8:18 a.m. "Are you sure?" Paul will be furious. Yvonne Givens at 8:20 a.m. "She needs to learn respect. This is the only way she'll understand her place in this family." The courtroom was silent. Judge Morrison continued reading. Dana Kane at 8:22 a.m. "Just don't leave marks where Paul will see them." Yvonne Givens at 8:24 a.m. "I know what I'm doing. She'll be more cooperative after this." Paul felt sick. Dana had not only known about the plan, she had helped coordinate it. "Your Honor," Dana's attorney said desperately, "my client was trying to establish household discipline." "Your client was planning to assault a child," Judge Morrison interrupted. "These messages clearly show premeditation." Dane presented more evidence. Yvonne's social media posts bragging about old-school discipline, Briggs's testimony about the instructions his mother had given him, and Torrance's documentation of Yvonne's escalating behavior patterns. When Dana's attorney tried to present their case claiming that Paul was overreacting and that Aviana was manipulative, Judge Morrison cut her off. "Ms. Cross, I've seen the medical evidence. I've read the text messages. Your clients planned and executed an assault on a 14-year-old child. What exactly are you asking me to overlook?" Judge Morrison called for a recess and asked to speak with Aviana privately. Paul watched his daughter walk into the judge's chambers with calm dignity and felt proud of her strength. 20 minutes later, Aviana emerged, and Judge Morrison returned to the bench. "I've spoken with the minor child involved in this case," Judge Morrison said. "She is articulate, intelligent, and credible. Her account of events matches the physical evidence and electronic communications perfectly." Judge Morrison looked directly at Dana and Yvonne. "I am appalled by what I've heard today. Ms. Givens, you systematically planned to abuse a child who was not your responsibility. Mrs. Kane, you enabled and coordinated this abuse despite your legal obligation to protect your stepdaughter." She turned to Paul. "Mr. Kane, I'm granting you full legal and physical custody of your daughter. The protective order against Ms. Givens is made permanent, and I'm extending it to include Mrs. Kane." Dana gasped. "Your Honor, I never touched Aviana." "No, but you planned for others to do so. You're just as culpable," Judge Morrison continued. "Mrs. Kane, you're prohibited from contacting your stepdaughter in any way. Ms. Givens, in addition to the permanent protective order, I'm recommending that the district attorney pursue the full extent of criminal charges against you. Paul felt relief wash over him like a physical sensation. Furthermore, Judge Morrison said, I'm ordering both defendants to undergo psychological evaluation and mandatory counseling before they're allowed any unsupervised contact with minor children. As the judge's gavel fell, Paul turned to see Dana crying at the plaintiff's table while Yvonne stared straight ahead with cold fury. Outside the courthouse, Paul hugged Aviana tightly. How do you feel? He asked. Safe, she said simply. For the first time in months, I feel safe. 2 weeks after the court hearing, Paul was grading welding projects in his office at the community college when his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. Paul Kane. Mr. Kane, this is Jennifer Walsh from Channel 4 News. I understand you were involved in a recent child abuse case that resulted in criminal charges. Would you be willing to speak on camera about your experience? Paul leaned back in his chair. How did you get my number? Court records are public, Mr. Kane. Your case has attracted attention because of the text messages showing premeditation. We're doing a story about recognizing signs of child abuse in blended families. Paul thought about it. Part of him wanted privacy, wanted to put this behind them and move on. But another part wanted other parents to understand what manipulation looked like, how abusers operated. Can I think about it? Of course. But Mr. Kane, your story could help other children in similar situations. That evening, Paul discussed it with Aviana over dinner at Laurel's house. What do you think? He asked. Would you be comfortable with me talking publicly about what happened? Aviana considered the question seriously. Will it help other kids? It might. Then I think you should do it. But Dad, I want to do it with you. Paul looked at his daughter in surprise. You want to be interviewed? I want to tell my story. I want other kids to know that it's okay to say no when adults try to hurt you. That there are grown-ups who will protect you if you tell the truth. Paul felt a surge of pride and protectiveness. Are you sure? Once it's out there, everyone will know what happened to you. Good. Maybe it will stop happening to other kids. 3 days later, Paul and Aviana sat in their living room. They had moved back into the house after Dana moved out speaking with Jennifer Walsh and her camera crew. Aviana, Jennifer said gently, what would you want to say to other kids who might be going through something similar? Aviana looked directly into the camera. I would tell them that it's not their fault, even if the adults try to make them think it is. I would tell them that there are people who will believe them and protect them if they ask for help. And I would tell them that they don't have to accept being treated badly just to keep the peace. What about parents? Jennifer asked Paul. What signs should they watch for? Trust your instincts, Paul said. If someone in your house is consistently critical of your child, if they talk about the need to bring them down a peg or teach them their place, pay attention. And if your child starts withdrawing, if their grades drop, if they seem anxious or unhappy at home, don't assume it's just a phase. The interview aired that Friday evening. Paul had expected some local attention, but he wasn't prepared for what happened next. Why Saturday morning, the story had been picked up by national news outlets. Paul's phone rang constantly with interview requests, and his inbox filled with messages from parents sharing their own stories. More significantly, the local school district called to ask if Paul would be willing to speak at a training session for teachers and counselors about recognizing signs of abuse in blended families. But the story's reach extended beyond Norman, Oklahoma. Paul started receiving messages from parents across the country who had recognized similar patterns in their own homes. One message particularly stood out for a woman in Denver. My sister moved in with us after her divorce, and she's been increasingly critical of my daughter. After seeing your interview, I realized she's been trying to establish dominance over my child the same way Yvonne did with Aviana. I asked her to leave yesterday. Thank you for having the courage to speak out. The most satisfying consequence came through Dane, who called Paul with an update on the criminal case. Yvonne's attorney approached the prosecutor about a plea deal, Dane reported. She wants to plead guilty to a reduced charge in exchange for avoiding prison time. What did the prosecutor say? He said no. Given the premeditation shown in the text messages and the media attention this case has received, he wants to make an example. Yvonne is going to trial. Paul felt a cold satisfaction. Good. She should face the full consequences of what she did. There's more. Dana's lawyer is trying to negotiate a settlement in the divorce proceedings. She wants to avoid a trial where all of this evidence becomes public record again. What kind of settlement? She's willing to waive any claim to marital property in exchange for a quick, quiet divorce. No alimony, no asset division, just a clean break. Paul considered this. What do you recommend? Take it. You get everything you want: full custody of Aviana, your house, your assets, and the guarantee that Dana disappears from your lives permanently. Meanwhile, Briggs was making progress in therapy with Torrance. According to Torrance's updates, the boy was beginning to understand how his mother had manipulated him into participating in Aviana's abuse. He wants to write Aviana a letter, Torrance told Paul during one of their regular check-ins. His therapist thinks it might be helpful for his healing process. What about Aviana's healing process? Paul asked. Is she ready for that? Paul discussed it with Aviana that evening. He wants to write you a letter, Paul explained. An apology? But you don't have to read it if you're not ready. Aviana was quiet for a moment. What would happen to the letter if I said no? Torrance would keep it. Maybe you'd read it someday when you felt ready, or maybe you wouldn't. Either choice would be okay. Can I think about it? Of course. A week later, Aviana told Paul she was ready to read Briggs's letter. Torrance delivered it personally, along with an update on his son's progress. He's a different kid, Torrance said. Away from Yvonne's influence, he's starting to show empathy and genuine remorse. But I want you both to know that he understands if Aviana never wants to see him again. Aviana read the letter privately in her room. When she emerged, her eyes were red, but her expression was thoughtful. What did he say? Paul asked. He said he was sorry for laughing when I got hurt. He said his mom told him I thought I was better than him, and that made him angry, but he knows now that wasn't true. He said he hopes someday I can forgive him, but he understands if I can't. How do you feel about that? I feel sorry for him. He was being used to in a different way. His mom taught him to hate me before he even met me. Paul marveled at his daughter's wisdom and compassion. Do you want to respond to his letter? Maybe someday, but not yet. I'm not angry at him anymore, but I'm not ready to be his friend either. That's perfectly reasonable. On a cold January afternoon, Paul was working in his garage when he heard car doors slam in his driveway. Through the window, he saw two familiar figures walking toward his front door. Dana and Yvonne, both looking haggard and desperate. That Paul's first instinct was to call the police. Yvonne was violating the permanent restraining order just by being on his property. But something about their posture, their obvious desperation, made him pause as he walked to the front door and opened it slightly, keeping the chain lock engaged. You're not supposed to be here, he said. Dana stepped forward, her eyes red with tears. Paul, please. We need to talk to Aviana. We need to apologize. No, please, Yvonne said, and Paul was shocked to see her kneel on his front porch. I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt her, but I need her to know that I'm sorry. Dana knelt beside her sister. Paul, we've lost everything. Our jobs, our reputation, our family. We just want a chance to make things right. Paul looked down at the two women who had turned his home into a battleground, who had planned and executed an assault on his daughter, who had blamed her for her own abuse. You broke your own crown thinking it made you taller, he said quietly. Stay down. He closed the door and engaged the deadbolt. Through the window, he watched them remain on their knees for several minutes, crying and begging to be heard. Then they slowly stood up and walked back to their car. Paul waited until they drove away, then called the police to report the restraining order violation. Later that evening, as he and Aviana were finishing dinner, she asked, Was someone at the door earlier? I thought I heard voices. Paul had debated whether to tell her about the visit. She was doing so well, thriving in the safety they had built together. But he had promised her honesty, and she deserved the truth. Dana and Yvonne came by. They wanted to apologize to you. Aviana set down her fork. What did you tell them? I told them no. Good. Aviana was quiet for a moment. Dad, what did you mean when you said they broke their own crown? Paul smiled. I meant that they thought hurting you would make them more important, more powerful. But all it did was destroy their own lives. And you told them to stay down. I told them that they made their choices, and now they have to live with the consequences. Aviana nodded. I'm glad you didn't let them in. I'm not ready to hear their apologies, and I might never be. That's your choice to make. And whatever you choose will be the right choice. 2 weeks later, Paul and Aviana sat in Judge Morrison's courtroom for Yvonne's sentencing hearing. Yvonne stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit, having been arrested for violating the restraining order. Ms. Givens, Judge Morrison said, "You have pleaded guilty to child abuse and to violating a protective order. Before I pass sentence, do you have anything to say?" Yvonne stood up slowly. "Your Honor, I want to apologize to Aviana. I thought I was helping her become a better person, but I realize now that I was wrong. I let my anger and frustration control my actions, and I hurt an innocent child." Paul looked at Aviana, who was listening with a neutral expression. "I accept full responsibility for my actions," Yvonne continued. "I don't blame anyone else for what I did. I only hope that someday Aviana can forgive me." Judge Morrison nodded. "Ms. Givens, I sentence you to 2 years in prison, suspended to 1 year with 5 years of supervised probation. You will also complete 200 hours of community service working with at-risk children, undergo mandatory anger management counseling, and pay restitution for Aviana's medical expenses and counseling costs." The gavel fell, and Yvonne was led away by the bailiff. Outside the courthouse, Aviana was quiet. "What are you thinking?" Paul asked. "I'm thinking that she still doesn't understand what she did wrong." "What do you mean?" "She said she thought she was helping me become a better person. But Dad, there was nothing wrong with me that needed fixing. I was just a kid who didn't want to be bullied." Paul felt a surge of pride at his daughter's insight. "You're absolutely right. And she said she hopes I can forgive her someday. But she never asked what I needed from her. She never asked how she could actually make things right. What would you need from her?" Aviana thought about it. "I would need her to understand that I was never the problem, that I didn't deserve what happened to me, that standing up for myself wasn't disrespectful, it was necessary." "Do you think she'll ever understand that?" "No. I think she'll always believe that kids should just do what adults tell them, even when it's wrong." Paul looked at his daughter with admiration. At 15 now, she had developed a wisdom and strength that many adults never achieved. "Then you're right not to waste your energy on forgiveness that wouldn't mean anything anyway." "Dad, yeah, I'm proud of us. For fighting back. For not letting them win." Paul put his arm around his daughter as they walked toward the parking garage. "I'm proud of us too, sweetheart. I'm proud of us too." Spring came early to Norman that year, and with it, a sense of renewal that Paul hadn't felt in years. He stood in his backyard, watching Aviana work on her latest project, a model house made from recycled materials for her architecture class. "What's the theme?" he asked, sitting down beside her at the picnic table. "The quiet fortress," she said, carefully gluing a small window into place. "It's a house where every room has a window, so there are no dark corners where bad things can hide." Paul examined the intricate model. "It's beautiful and smart. The assignment was to design a house that represents safety. This is what safety looks like to me." Over the past few months, Aviana had thrown herself into her studies with renewed focus. Her grades were excellent, her social life was healthy, and she had discovered a passion for architecture that surprised them both. "I want to design houses for families who need fresh starts," she had told Paul. "Houses where kids feel safe and protected." Paul had encouraged her dreams while marveling at how she had transformed her trauma into purpose. The doorbell interrupted his thoughts. Paul found Torrance and Briggs on his front porch, the boy holding a large envelope. "Hi, Mr. Kane," Briggs said nervously. "I finished my therapy program, and I wanted to show Aviana something." Paul called for Aviana, who came to the door with cautious curiosity. "Hi, Aviana," Briggs said. "I know you don't want to talk to me, and that's okay, but I wanted to show you what I've been working on." He handed her the envelope. Inside was a detailed pencil drawing of a girl sitting at a desk, surrounded by books and art supplies, with light streaming through a window behind her. "It's you," Briggs said quietly. "The way I should have seen you from the beginning. Smart and creative and good. Not the person my mom told me you were." Aviana studied the drawing for a long moment. "It's really good, Briggs. Thank you. I also wanted to tell you that I understand now why you said no when I asked you to do my laundry. You weren't being mean or stuck up. You were just being fair to yourself." Aviana nodded. "That's right. And I'm sorry I laughed when..." Briggs's voice broke. I'm sorry I laughed when she hurt you. That was the worst thing I've ever done, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Paul watched his daughter's face, seeing her process Briggs's words. I accept your apology, she said finally, and I forgive you. But Briggs, I need you to understand something. We're never going to be friends like nothing happened. Too much damage was done. I understand, but I'm not angry at you anymore, and I hope you have a good life. Briggs nodded, tears in his eyes. I hope you do too. And Aviana, if anyone ever tries to hurt you again, I hope you fight back just as hard as you did before. After they left, Paul and Aviana returned to the backyard and her model house. How do you feel? Paul asked. Lighter, she said. Like I was carrying something heavy, and I finally got to put it down. Paul's phone buzzed with a text from Eli. Congratulations on the promotion, Professor Kane. Well deserved. The college had offered Paul a position as department head, recognizing his leadership during the crisis and his commitment to his students. Good news, Aviana asked. The college wants me to head the welding department. Better pay, more responsibility, and it means I can help shape the program for years to come. That's amazing, Dad. Are you going to take it? What do you think? Aviana grinned. I think you should take it. I think we've earned some good changes in our lives. That evening, as they ate dinner on the back porch, Aviana said, Dad, I've been thinking about something. What's that? I want to change my last name back to just Kane, not Kane Givens. Paul understood. When he had married Dana, Aviana had hyphenated her name as a gesture of acceptance toward her new stepfamily. Now she wanted to reclaim her identity. We can take care of that tomorrow if you want. I do want. I want to be Aviana Kane again. Just me and you. Just me and you. Paul agreed. As the sun set over their quiet neighborhood, Paul reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The past year had tested them in ways he never could have imagined, but it had also revealed strengths they didn't know they possessed. Aviana had learned that she could stand up for herself, that her voice mattered, that she deserved to be treated with respect and kindness. She had learned that some battles were worth fighting, even when the cost was high. Paul had learned that protecting his daughter required more than just loving her. It required courage, decisive action, and the willingness to sacrifice anything that threatened her well-being. He had learned that some lines, once crossed, could never be uncrossed, and some people, once they showed their true nature, deserved to be believed. Most importantly, they had both learned that they could depend on each other completely, that their bond was strong enough to survive any storm. Dad, Aviana said, as they cleaned up the dinner dishes. What is it, sweetheart? Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stood up for me? If you had just tried to keep the peace? Paul considered the question. Sometimes. But then I look at you now, confident, happy, safe, and I know we made the right choice. Even though it cost you your marriage. Aviana, that marriage was built on a lie. Dana pretended to care about you to win me, then showed her true colors once she thought she had me trapped. Losing her wasn't a cost, it was freedom. Aviana hugged him tightly. I love you, Dad. I love you too, kiddo. More than anything in this world. Later that night, Paul checked on Aviana before going to bed. She was asleep with her architecture books scattered around her, her model house sitting on the nightstand like a promise of the future she was building. Paul turned off her light and closed the door quietly. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to build the life they both deserved. But tonight, his daughter was safe, sleeping peacefully in a house where she was loved and protected. The line in the dust had been drawn. The battle had been fought, and they had won. Not because they were stronger than their enemies, but because they were willing to fight for what mattered most: truth, justice, and the right of every child to grow up safe and loved. In the end, that was the only victory that counted.